The cleaning wing of a Wrath Prime always smelled faintly of cold metal and the strange. Lavender mist the aliens used for purity
You
rituals.
have to trust me now.
And every
We don't
time
have much
Ethan
time.
stepped into that hallway, he felt like a misplaced shadow, wandering through a world that didn't belong to him. A human janitor in a palace built for beings taller than him, stronger than him, and shaped by laws older than Earth itself. Yet he moved with careful respect, his gloved hands gentle on every surface. Because he had learned long ago, kindness was the only universal language that crossed species without needing translation. Ethan never imagined his entire life would change because of a touch that lasted less than a heartbeat. But fate often hides inside moments that look innocent until they explode into storms. And that day had begun like any other, quiet and uneventful. The palace corridors humming with distant energy from the planetary shields and the hum of hovering guards who barely glanced at him. The alien princess, Lysera of House Vareth, was walking through the corridor, her silver blue skin shimmering beneath torchlight crystals. Her eyes focused downward as if lost in thoughts too heavy for someone so young. But she carried the weight of a future treaty, a burden that bent her shoulders even when she tried to stand tall. And Ethan, sweeping alone near the reflection panels, saw something flicker across her arm. Something faint, something alive, something wrong. At first, he thought it was a trick of the palace lights. But then he saw her wince, barely, a quick tightening around her eyes. The kind that only someone who truly looked would notice. Because no one else did, not her guards, not her advisors, not the nobles bowing to her. And the moment she drew closer, Ethan saw the shifting ripple beneath her skin. A pulse that didn't match her breathing, a glow like wildfire buried under flesh. And without thinking, he stepped forward. "Princess, wait." There's something, his voice cracked with urgency. Not disrespect, but the guards never cared for the difference. Still, the moment before they struck him down, his hand brushed her forearm. A single soft touch meant to stop her from stepping into danger he could feel but could not name. And the universe froze. Gasps echoed across the corridor. Armored boots slammed down, weapons raised. And Princess Lysera stared at him with wide, startled eyes, the glow beneath her skin now pulsing violently like a trapped star. But the law had already been broken, because no human, no outsider, no commoner was ever allowed to touch an Arathi royal. Not even to save their life. The guards dragged Ethan backward, his feet scraping against the polished floor, but his eyes never left the princess. Because in the moment their skin touched, he felt her tremble, not in disgust, but in fear, real fear. The kind that did not belong to a future ruler surrounded by armies and warships. The kind that whispered of something inside her body twisting into something dangerous. "Release him," Lysera said. Her voice soft but shaken, yet the guards ignored her. Because tradition stood taller than her authority until the coronation. And Ethan watched helplessly as she pressed her hand against her arm. Her fingers trembling, her breaths uneven. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. And she knew he had seen it before anyone else, but it did not matter. By the time he was dragged into the lower chamber, stripped of his ID badge and shoved into a cold seat, the accusation had already been carved into the air like a sentence delivered by fate itself. Human Ethan Graves, charged with unlawful contact with the alien princess, violation of royal purity law and disruption of royal protocol. Every word echoed like a hammer against bone. But Ethan's mind was still trapped in the moment he touched her. In the heat under her skin, in the fear in her eyes. Something inside her was changing, something alive, something dangerous. And he was the only one who sensed it. He tried to explain, his voice unsteady but honest, telling them he saw a pulse, a distortion, a sign of infection or maybe a parasite. But the council members stared at him with cold detachment, their faces unreadable. Their elongated pupils narrowing with irritation rather than curiosity. Because to them, a human janitor claiming he noticed something no one else could was nothing more than arrogance wearing the shape of concern. "You expect us to believe you saw a medical anomaly our royal healers failed to detect?" one counselor asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "I don't expect you to believe me," Ethan replied. "But I know what I saw, and she was in pain." The chamber went silent. Not because they were moved, but because they were offended that a human would dare speak of the princess with such familiarity. Yet beneath the tension, Ethan felt the same strange tug in his gut. Something whispering that whatever he saw was not normal, not harmless, not random. Something that might ignite into something far worse if ignored. "You are dismissed," they said coldly, meaning not excused, but discarded. Stripped of position, barred from palace grounds, and pushed toward the metallic exit where the air smelled of rust and exile. But as the doors closed behind him, Ethan felt no shame. Only a trembling unease twisting beneath his ribs because he knew the princess was not safe. Not from her guards, not from her advisors, not from the invisible thing moving under her skin, and maybe not even from herself and somewhere deep inside the palace. In a room humming with royal energy, Princess Lysera pressed her glowing arm against her chest, whispering to herself with a fear she could tell no one. He saw it, the human saw it, and fate shifted, waiting for the moment their paths would collide again in a way that would change destinies, rewrite laws, and spark a battle no one else could foresee. Night fell differently on Aruth Prime, sinking not with darkness, but with shimmering blue veils that drifted across the sky like liquid auroras. And Ethan sat alone on the stone ledge outside the palace perimeter, staring at those drifting lights as if they held answers he had no language for, the dismissal echoing inside him like a wound he couldn't clean. Yet even the sting of losing his job barely mattered compared to the memory of the princess's trembling arm, that unnatural ripple beneath her skin. That fear she tried to hide, he kept replaying it. The warmth of her forearm against his glove, the sudden flare of energy beneath her skin, the sharp inhale she made before the guards dragged him away. And every time he saw it in his mind, he felt a deeper certainty settle inside him, the kind that came from instinct, from experience, from the sharpened awareness of someone who had lived a life watching for danger in places others ignored. Because humans were shaped by survival long before they became known across the stars. Across the city, the palace shimmered like a mountain of crystal, its towers glowing softly under the shifting night. And somewhere inside that cold beauty was a girl who didn't know why her body was betraying her. A princess raised under rules so strict she was forbidden from speaking of weakness. Because Arathi royalty were taught to be symbols, not people carved from honor and duty, and symbols were not allowed to tremble. Meanwhile, Ethan had nowhere to go but forward. Walking through the neon-lit streets of Kairos district, a place humming with the noise of vendors, floating trams, and off-world travelers blending into the evening chaos. Yet even among thousands, he felt strangely alone, carrying a secret no one would believe even if he shouted it into the sky. But the truth followed him with every breath. Something was happening to the princess, something spreading beneath her skin like a silent storm. And ignoring it felt like abandoning a life he had accidentally touched and accidentally endangered. His thoughts spiraled until he heard a soft, mechanical chirp behind him, a drone no larger than a child's head hovering close, projecting a faint symbol he recognized instantly. The crest of House Vareth glowing like a whisper. And then a voice, trembling, young, royal. "Human Ethan Graves," the message stuttered, as if the speaker hesitated. "I request your presence." The drone flickered, projecting an image of Princess Lysera's face, pale and strained, her eyes clouded by worry, her lips pressed together as if fighting pain with dignity. "I need to meet you," she said quietly. "Please." The message ended, leaving the drone fluttering patiently in front of him. waiting to guide him, and Ethan felt his stomach twist. Because everything in Arathi law screamed that this was a trap, or at least an offense punishable by exile. Yet her voice lingered like a trembling cord tugging his chest. She wasn't issuing a royal command. She was asking, pleading, and he couldn't walk away. The drone led him through narrow streets, past glowing archways and silent courtyards, eventually descending to a concealed entrance beneath the palace. Not the grand gates used by nobles, but a hidden maintenance corridor built for workers like him. A path he knew well, a path he once cleaned daily without realizing the secrets it hid. And when he stepped inside, the air felt colder, sharper, as though the palace held its breath. Lysera stood in the dim light of a single hovering lamp, her posture tense, her hands clasped in front of her as if restraining them from shaking. And when she turned to face him, he saw her arm again. The glow beneath her skin brighter now, like molten metal trapped beneath crystal. "I should not be here," she whispered, her voice trembling with truth and fear. "And you should not have come." "Then why call me?" Ethan asked gently, keeping his voice steady, knowing sudden movements could draw the attention of palace censors. "Because you saw it," she breathed, her eyes glimmering with both relief and shame. "No one else did. Not my advisors, not my healers. They tell me it is stress or imagination. But I know my own body, Ethan. Something is wrong. Something alive moves beneath my skin." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her hand over the glowing patch, wincing as the movement pulsed outward like ripples through water. "When you touched me today," she continued hesitantly, "the energy changed. It pulled back." As if afraid, Ethan felt a chill trace his spine, because he had felt it too. The brief recoil under his hand before the guards separated them. And now the glow throbbed in strange rhythms that did not follow biological patterns. "Princess, this could be a parasite, or a bioform, or even sabotage," Ethan said, his words cautious but urgent. "You need help." "I cannot seek help," she whispered. Stepping closer, her voice strained. "The moment they know something is wrong with me, the council will strip my claim to the throne. They will replace me with someone older, someone untainted, and my people will face war without the alliance I am meant to secure." Her breath shook, her resolve battling her fear. "And they cannot know a human noticed what my own kind missed," she added softly. It would shame them. Ethan understood then that she wasn't just fighting whatever lived inside her. She was fighting an entire culture built on pride, duty, and unbreakable law. And she stood alone inside it, trembling yet refusing to bow, and something inside him tightened with respect. A fierce protective instinct awakening like a spark catching fire. "Show me," he said quietly. "Let me help." She hesitated, then slowly held out her arm, the glow swirling beneath her skin like a trapped nebula twisting through a fragile shell. And when Ethan leaned close, he saw tiny fractures forming along the sapphire-like surface of her dermal layer. Cracks too faint for most to notice, but clear to him. A warning that whatever was inside her wanted out. A distant thrum echoed through the corridor, a vibration that didn't belong to palace machinery. And Lysara's eyes widened. "They're searching for me," she whispered, fear threading through her voice like ice. "And if they find you with me, both our fates will be sealed." The glow beneath her skin surged violently, and Ethan stepped closer, instinctively reaching for her arm. Not to break the law this time, but to steady her as her knees weakened under the sudden wave of pain. "Ethan," she gasped, her voice cracking like breaking glass. "It's waking," and the palace walls trembled ever so slightly, as if something ancient and unseen had opened its eyes for the first time beneath. The skin of a princess, destined for a throne she might never reach. The trembling beneath Lysara's skin deepened, spreading in slow waves that made her breath falter. And Ethan felt helpless for a heartbeat as he watched her clutch her arm. the glow shifting from a soft pulse to a violent flare that painted the walls in shades of sapphire and burning gold. The air crackling with a strange electric hum that whispered of something alive and ancient stirring inside her. Something that did not belong to any world he knew. He held her shoulders gently, guiding her to the narrow support beam beside the maintenance door. And she leaned against it, her breath shuddering like a fragile thread pulled too tight. Her eyes half closed as she tried to contain the pain. But the glow was not softening, it was expanding, forming branching patterns beneath her skin like roots of fire searching for escape. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fear she had tried so hard to hide. "Ethan, I can feel it growing, as if it's learning me, mapping me, taking something from me." Her words chilled him more than the cold metallic air of the corridor. Because nothing harmless behaved like that, nothing natural grew with intention, and the patterns beneath her skin were too symmetrical, too purposeful, too sharp to be a disease. "Tell me exactly when it started," Ethan said softly, keeping her anchored with his steady presence. Even though inside him, every instinct screamed that they were standing on the edge of something far larger than either of them. She closed her eyes, remembering, and her voice grew quiet, as though speaking too loudly might awaken the thing inside her even more. "The night before I returned from the southern colonies," she whispered, "I felt a sting, very small. Like a spark under my skin, I dismissed it. I was tired, overwhelmed, struggling with the Council's expectations. But then it grew hotter, heavier, and now it feels like it has a heartbeat of its own." Ethan exhaled slowly, not wanting to alarm her, yet every detail felt like confirmation of a nightmare. Sabotage disguised as illness, a parasite woven with purpose, or perhaps a weapon meant to unravel her from the inside. "A silent strike disguised as biology, Lysera," he said gently. "Someone may have done this to you." Her eyes flew open, shimmering with fear and disbelief, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she stepped closer as if his presence grounded her, her trembling hand reaching for stability as her world tilted beneath her feet. "I cannot accuse anyone," she whispered. "Not without proof, not without risking war. My marriage treaty decides the fate of 3 systems. Ethan, if I falter, if I fall, my people pay the price. Your life matters too," Ethan replied quietly. And she froze at the softness in his voice, at the simple truth no one else dared say. Because to everyone else, she was a symbol, a future ruler, a political bond. Never a frightened girl carrying an invisible threat beneath her skin. Her breath wavered, and she looked at him with something raw in her eyes. A mixture of fear, gratitude, and a fragile trust blooming in the shadow of danger. "You are the only one who sees me," she whispered, her voice quivering. "Not the title, not the duty. Just me." The corridor hummed with faint vibrations, distant patrol units scanning for her energy signature. And Ethan knew their time was thinning like smoke, but Lysera wasn't ready to move yet. She pressed her glowing arm against her chest, fighting another surge that lit her body from within. Her silhouette flickering like a lantern struggling against storm winds. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me what it feels like now." She inhaled sharply as another wave rippled beneath her skin, her knees weakening again, and Ethan caught her elbows before she fell. The heat radiating from her skin, pushing against his palms like a living force, testing him. "It feels like it's listening," she whispered, her voice trembling with dread. "When I am afraid, it moves faster. When I calm myself, it slows. It reacts to me, Ethan, as if it's studying me." Her fear, once hidden beneath royal composure, now poured through every word like an unspoken cry. And Ethan felt something inside him tighten, a protective instinct rising with the same fierceness that had made him touch her earlier without thinking. The same instinct that now refused to let her face this alone. The palace tremor returned. Slightly stronger this time, and Lysera flinched. Her hand flying to her arm, the glow swirling into a spiral that made Ethan's heart pound. Because spirals meant design, intelligence, or a signal trying to stabilize. Whatever this is, he murmured. It's communicating, Lysera's breath caught. With me, or with something else, Ethan added softly, the thought slicing through the air like a cold blade. A shadow flickered across the far end of the corridor, followed by the faint metallic whir of scanner drones. And Lysera tensed, her fingers curling around Ethan's sleeve. The first time she had touched him willingly. The gesture instinctive and desperate, not bound by law or fear of tradition, but born from the raw terror that she might be found, misunderstood, and silenced before the truth ever surfaced. "They will not listen," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They will take me, confine me. Call it a royal contamination, lock me behind ceremonial walls, and no one will ever know what is inside me." "And what if it becomes something worse while you're alone?" Ethan asked gently. "What if it's waiting for isolation?" Her breath hitched because she had imagined that too. The fear that whatever lived inside her might grow stronger in silence, hidden until it tore through her like breaking crystal. The glow surged again, bright enough to cast their shadows across the wall like giants locked in a silent war. And Lysera leaned into him, her forehead brushing his shoulder for a fleeting moment of unguarded vulnerability. The kind that would have shattered her royal image if anyone saw, yet meant everything to the frightened girl trembling behind it. "Ethan," she whispered, "promise me I am not imagining this. Promise me I am not losing myself." He held her steady, feeling her tremors, her heat, her fear, and his voice softened into something fierce and unyielding. "You're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Whatever this is, we face it together." Her eyes glimmered at his words, not with hope yet, but with the fragile spark of trust forming in the center of terror. And the corridor around them vibrated again, this time followed by a low, distant rumble, as if something massive had awakened beneath the planet's surface and answered the pulse inside her with a pulse of its own. Lysera's breath faltered, and she whispered with a trembling voice, "It's calling to something," and Ethan felt the truth settle over him like a cold, undeniable shadow. "No," he murmured, his heart pounding. "Something is calling to you." The distant rumble grew deeper, rolling through the hidden corridor like the heartbeat of something colossal buried beneath the palace. And Lysera's body tensed as the glow beneath her skin spiraled faster, the swirling patterns synchronizing with the vibrations in the ground. And Ethan felt a cold ripple spread through his chest as he realized the pulse inside her wasn't random anymore. It was responding, aligning, preparing. Lysera pressed her hand to the wall to steady herself as another flare lit her arm, the sapphire glow twisting into lines so sharp and geometric they looked carved by a master, artisan rather than formed in living flesh. And Ethan's breath caught because the shapes were too precise, too ancient in design, older than Arathi culture, older perhaps than both their species. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, her voice trembling like a thin thread pulled too tight. "The more the vibrations grow, the more it responds, Ethan, it feels like something beneath the surface is awakening me." The air around them thickened with an almost metallic scent, as if the atmosphere was being pulled into a slow, unseen storm. And Ethan gently took her trembling wrist to guide her deeper into the maintenance tunnels, away from the patrol drones closing in on her location. Yet even as they moved, Lysera kept glancing downward, as if the ground itself was calling her by name. They stopped near a service chamber lit only by emergency lamps, their golden glow barely pushing back the shadows. And Lysera leaned against the wall with a shudder, her breath uneven, her hair clinging to her forehead as the glow beneath her skin pulsed in frantic waves. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw fear. "I'm hearing something." He stepped closer, his chest tightening. Hearing what? A whisper, she breathed. Her eyes unfocused, but not in words. It feels ancient. Like a memory I never lived, calling from beneath the ground, calling from inside me before he could answer. The floor vibrated again, stronger this time, sending dust drifting from the ceiling, and the emergency lamps flickered as if the energy grid itself trembled under the weight of something rising. But what made Ethan's blood run cold was Lysara's reaction. Because she didn't just hear it, she echoed it. Her skin glowing in the exact pattern of the vibration, as if her body formed part of the signal. "Lysara," he whispered, "this isn't infection. This isn't sabotage." Her eyes lifted to his. Shimmering with tears, she could no longer hide. "Then what is it?" Before Ethan could speak, a sharp metallic shriek echoed through the corridor, and they both froze as the maintenance wall behind them split open in a thin, controlled line, not damaged by impact, but sliced intentionally from the inside. The metal peeling back like petals of a flower under invisible hands, revealing a chamber neither of them had ever known existed beneath the palace. A circular vault bathed in deep blue light pulsed behind the opening, its surface covered in the same geometric patterns glowing under Lysara's skin. The same spirals, the same ancient lines. And Ethan felt his breath stop because the truth hung in the air like a blade. "Terrifying and undeniable. It's reacting to you," he whispered. "It opened for you." Lysara stepped forward as if drawn by a force too powerful to resist, her fear mixing with awe in her trembling steps. And Ethan followed, unable to let her face the unknown alone. The chamber humming like a sleeping creature slowly waking from centuries of silence. When her foot crossed the threshold, the glow in her arms surged violently, flooding her entire body with radiant blue light. And she gasped, stumbling forward until Ethan caught her. Her body shaking as the vault around them blazed to life with swirling symbols that shifted like galaxies in motion. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice thin and fragile. "I feel." Connected, she pressed her hand against her chest. Her breath ragged, her fear warring with something deeper. A strange pull rising inside her, a sense of belonging that terrified her more than the pain. And then the twist struck like lightning. A holographic projection burst from the center of the vault, ancient and flickering, forming the shape of an Arathi figure draped in ceremonial armor. But its features were older than any royal line. Its presence heavy with authority that transcended time. And Lysara's knees weakened as the projection spoke in a deep, resonant tone that shook the chamber. "Successor identified," the voice thundered. "Genetic awakening in progress." Lysara's eyes widened in horror. "Successor to what?" The projection turned its head slowly toward her, its glowing eyes reflecting the same spiral that lived beneath her skin. "You carry the dormant seed of the first sovereign," it declared. "Your lineage was chosen long before your birth. Your awakening marks the return of the sovereign network." Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him, his heart pounding as he processed the words, the implications, the terrifying truth. Lysara wasn't poisoned, she wasn't sabotaged, she wasn't infected. She was awakening not into sickness, but into power, a power her people thought extinct, a power that once commanded worlds. A power that could either unite or destroy entire star systems. Lysara stared at the projection, trembling, her voice barely a whisper. This was never supposed to happen. And Ethan felt dread settle over them like a shadow stretching across destiny. Because the glow beneath her skin was no longer the sign of an enemy's weapon, it was the sign of a throne older than her entire civilization calling her back, and the world above them was about to learn that the princess they tried to control carried the power of a forgotten ruler capable of reshaping fate itself. The chamber vibrated as if the world beneath Aerith Prime had finally woken. And Lysara clutched her glowing arm, her breath fractured by fear and something deeper. something ancient stirring through her veins like liquid fire. The holographic sovereign gazing down at her as if judging whether her heart was worthy of the power she had never asked to carry. And Ethan stood at her side, feeling the enormity of the moment crush the air from his lungs. Above them, the palace trembled as warning sirens erupted through the halls. The echo of armored boots racing across bridges and polished walkways. The entire royal guard mobilizing in frantic waves because the sensors had detected an energy spike so massive it triggered planetary alerts. Yet they could not imagine that the source of the anomaly was there. Princess standing hidden beneath their feet, trembling under the weight of a destiny older than every law they held sacred. Lysera staggered forward as the projection intensified, its voice expanding through the chamber like a storm breaking open the sky. Awakening sequence initiated, sovereign protocol unfolding. The air must merge with the core. Her eyes widened, terror glimmering like shattered crystal. Merge with what? What does that mean? The vault floor lit beneath her feet. Spirals of pale gold and deep blue swirling outward like a celestial map. And Ethan grabbed her shoulders to keep her steady as a violent tremor shook the entire room. Fragments of ancient metal falling like snow. Lysera looked up at him with trembling eyes, her fear wrapped in something heartbreakingly human. Ethan, I don't want this. I don't want to become something I don't understand. His voice softened even as the world roared around them. You're still you. Power doesn't rewrite the heart unless you let it, but the sovereign projection turned sharply toward Ethan, its gaze slicing through him like a blade of light. Human, your presence was not foreseen. Yet you interfere with the awakening. Ethan felt a cold ripple crawl across his spine. I'm not interfering. I'm helping her stay alive. The hologram's voice thundered through the vault. The Sovereign's awakening will reshape political balance across the 12 systems. Countless factions will move to control or destroy the heir before alignment completes. Lysera's breath broke as she whispered, Galaxies will fall into war over a power I never chose. And Ethan suddenly saw the future the hologram described. The shattering of alliances, the rise of warlords, the collapse of governments built on fragile peace. All because a young princess carried an ancient legacy beneath her skin that could command fleets and warp destiny. And he realized the council would never protect her. They would lock her away, dissect her identity, or hand her to the highest bidder. The floor split open in a perfect circle, revealing a glowing pool of light far beneath them, swirling like the surface of a newborn star, its energy pulsing in harmony with the glow in Lysera's body. And she gasped, covering her mouth as the chamber shook even harder. This is the core, she whispered, instincts awakening in her bones as if her ancestors spoke through her blood. It wants me to step inside. Ethan grabbed her wrist. Not harshly, but with a desperation born of love he had not yet understood. Lysera, if you step into that thing, you might lose yourself. You may not come back the same. Her voice trembled. If I don't go, the awakening will tear me apart. The hologram echoed her words with brutal finality. Failure to merge will result in catastrophic biological collapse. The heir must ascend or perish. The chamber trembled again, this time with a deep, roaring wave that traveled up through the palace and into the atmosphere. And far above them, Aerith Prime's sky lit with streaks of fire as royal warships scrambled into formation, their sensors detecting unidentified signatures in orbit. Unknown ships converging, drawn by the energy flare of a sovereign awakening. Lysera looked upward, her eyes filled with dread. They're coming. Outsiders, scavengers. Ancient enemies of my ancestors, they sensed the awakening before my own people did. Ethan felt panic seize his chest as he imagined fleets gathering in the void, each one prepared to strike first and seize the sovereign core for themselves. And suddenly he understood why the universe feared this power. Why entire Civilizations had buried its existence, but Lysera stepped closer to the core. Drawn by a pull, she could no longer fight, and her voice shook as she whispered, "Ethan, I'm afraid." He moved with her, refusing to let her take even one step alone. "I'm with you. Whatever happens, whatever this turns you into. You're not facing it without me." The hologram flared brighter as Lysera's entire body ignited with brilliant blue light, her hair lifting as though caught in cosmic wind. The patterns beneath her skin burning like molten constellations, rewriting themselves across her bones. She looked at Ethan one last time, her voice barely more than breath. "You believed me when no one else did. You saw me when the world only saw a symbol. And you stayed." The core surged upward like a rising star, engulfing her in spirals of light, and Ethan held onto her hand until the force became too strong, ripping their fingers apart as she was lifted into the center of the cosmic pool, her silhouette arching in a suspended moment of agony and transcendence. The chamber roared like a dying sun, and Ethan stumbled backward as light consumed the vault, the hologram declaring with earth-shaking power, "The Sovereign returns." The walls exploded outward with a shockwave that swept through the palace, through the city, through the sky itself, sending every scanning ship into a frenzy as the energy signals spread across the stars, like a beacon announcing the rebirth of a power thought lost forever. Galaxies trembled, fleets turned toward Aerith Prime, old enemies awakened, all because one princess stepped into a destiny no one had prepared her for. And Ethan, shielding his eyes from the cosmic blaze, whispered into the roaring light, "Lysera, come back to me." But destiny had already opened its mouth, and the universe was beginning to answer. The blast of light faded slowly, retreating like a collapsing star, leaving a shimmering haze floating through the ruined vault. And Ethan pushed himself upright with trembling arms, his breath shaking as he stared into the core chamber, now dimmed to a deep, pulsing blue, the air heavy with heat and humming energy. The silence too vast for comfort, too unnatural for hope. Where Lysera had stood moments ago was now a column of faint light, swirling with soft sparks that drifted upward like fragments of a fading nebula. And Ethan's heart twisted painfully because he didn't know if she had ascended, transformed, or been lost to something cosmic and merciless. The kind of ancient power that did not care for the fragile bonds of individuals. He stepped closer, calling her name into the shimmering air. "Lysera," his voice breaking against the charged silence, as if the chamber itself swallowed his words before they could reach her. And dread pulled at him like gravity. The hologram flickered suddenly, its once powerful form now distorted, parts of its projection crumbling like dust in strong wind, yet its voice still echoed faintly. "The Sovereign's merge is incomplete, integration unstable." External interference detected. Ethan felt every muscle in his body freeze. Because if the merge was unstable, then Lysera was trapped between what she had been and what the core demanded she become, suspended in a state where a single disruption could destroy her from within. "What interference?" Ethan demanded, stepping toward the hologram, though the air vibrated like heated metal. The projection glitched again, its image splitting, then reforming. Foreign signals converging on Aerith Prime. Hostile fleets drawn by awakening signature. Destabilizing the core's equilibrium, Ethan's breath caught. "Lysera's life depends on the balance, doesn't it?" "Affirmative," the hologram whispered, its light dimming further. "If the fleets engage, if the palace shields shift, if surrounding energy fluctuates, the air will collapse." A shiver cut through Ethan's spine because above them the sky already boiled with conflict. Warships descending, enemies gathering, the galaxy tightening its grip around a single girl suspended in cosmic transformation. And he could do nothing but stand in the ruins of a vault older than empires and pray the universe would show mercy for once. But mercy was never something the galaxy offered freely. The ground trembled as a distant explosion rippled through the palace, Dust drifting from the ceiling, the alarms above growing frantic. And Ethan realized the attackers had already reached orbit, pushing against planetary defenses, hammering at the shields designed only for ceremonial threats, never for the rise of an ancient sovereign reborn. He grabbed onto a support beam as another tremor shook the underground chamber. His breath ragged, his mind racing because Lysera was helpless inside the core, unable to defend herself, unable to speak, unable even to know he was still there. And for the first time, he felt the crushing fear of losing someone whose life had intertwined with his in ways he hadn't understood until the moment. She vanished into blinding light. The column of faint glow flickered violently, spiraling in chaotic patterns that made Ethan's heart slam against his ribs. "Stay with me," he whispered, toward the light, as if she could hear him through layers of cosmic energy. "Lysera, stay with me. Don't let that thing take you away." A pulse surged through the air like a heartbeat. Faint, but real, and Ethan's eyes widened, his chest tightening because it felt like a response. Fragile and flickering, but hers. "You hear me?" he whispered again, feeling heat sting at the corners of his eyes. "I'm right here. I'm not leaving." A second pulse answered him, weaker but present, but the ground roared before he could say more. A massive impact, shaking the entire cavern as something large struck the planet's outer shield, sending a wave of energy crackling through the palace structure, the vault walls groaning under the pressure. And the faint light around Lysera spasmed violently as if the surge tore at her from the inside. "Stop!" Ethan cried, reaching toward her even though the energy burned his skin. "Don't break. Please don't break." The hologram sputtered again. Integration destabilizing. The heir's body cannot withstand extended anomalies. External threat must be neutralized. Ethan stared upward at the ceiling as if he could see through layers of stone, crystal, and sky to the orbit above, where rival fleets prepared to tear the planet apart just to claim the power growing inside one terrified princess. And rage erupted inside him, raw and blazing. Because Lysera had spent her whole life bound by laws that treated her like property or symbol. And now the galaxy wanted to tear her apart for something she never chose. He would not let her die for destiny, for politics, for ancient power she never asked to inherit. His fists clenched, his voice a low growl of grief and fury. "If the galaxy wants her, they'll have to go through me." Yet, even as he spoke, the light around Lysera flickered so faintly it looked ready to go out, and Ethan stepped closer, ignoring the burning in his hands as he touched the warm core of light where her form had vanished. The energy swirling violently at his presence, but stabilizing, just barely, as if responding once again to the human who saw what no one else could. "Lysera," he whispered shakily. "You're fighting. I can feel it. Hold on. Don't let this thing swallow you. Don't let those ships decide your future. Fight your way back." A faint spark brushed his fingertips like a trembling heartbeat, but far above them, a deep, echoing boom split through the planet as the first enemy warship broke through the outer shield, its descent streaking the sky with fire, and Ethan knew the final storm had begun. The core pulsed in violent panic. The vault trembled. The light around Lysera dimmed toward collapse, and Ethan's voice broke as he whispered into the rising chaos. "I won't let the universe take you, not while I'm still breathing." The chamber roared. The world shook, and destiny drew its blade, preparing for the final strike. The world above them thundered as the invading warship tore through the last layer of Aerith Prime's shields, its descent shaking the palace foundations until dust fell like pale snow through the cracks of the ancient vault. And Ethan stood before the swirling column of dimming light where Lysera hung suspended between life and transformation, his hands trembling as he pressed them against the glowing surface, refusing to step back even as the chamber roared with the birth of cosmic forces he barely understood. "Stay with me," he whispered. voice shaking from the weight of fear in his throat. Lysera, don't let this be the end. The light flickered once, faint as a dying flame, and Ethan felt something twist inside him, a hollow ache that felt too large for one human heart. The ache of losing someone who had entered his life like a quiet blue flame and reshaped everything he believed about courage, destiny, and the unseen strength inside those who stood alone too long. Another explosion rippled through the planet as the enemy ship's landing thrusters ignited, sending shockwaves across the city, its shadow blotting out the sky as it descended toward the palace to claim the awakening sovereign. Drawn like predators sensing a wounded star, the hologram sputtered back to life. Fractured and fading, integration critical. The air cannot stabilize without anchoring. Ethan pressed closer to the light, his voice fierce with desperation. Tell me what to do. The hologram flickered, its form dissolving in and out of existence. The sovereign's core reacts to emotional resonance. The heir's identity must anchor through a link, something familiar, trusted, chosen. Ethan's breath caught as he understood. You're saying she needs someone to pull her back? Affirmative? The hologram whispered as cracks mapped across its projection like fragile glass. But the link must withstand the core's power. It will burn through unworthy minds. Only one who sees her beyond destiny can hold the connection. Ethan looked up at the swirling column where faint traces of Lysera's silhouette flickered like a body trapped in tangled galaxies. And his voice softened with a determination deeper than fear. She's not a symbol to me, he murmured. She's a person, scared, brave, stubborn, kinder than the world ever let her be, and she deserves her own future. He stepped forward, letting the core's energy lash against him, searing pain streaking through his arms as the light curled around his skin like living fire. But he did not withdraw, his voice steady even as his knees weakened. Lysera, he whispered, come back to me. The chamber pulsed once, the floor shuddering beneath him as if destiny itself were leaning in to listen. He pressed both hands into the heart of the glow, feeling the heat rise like molten wind, feeling his consciousness blur at the edges as the core tested him, tearing at his memories, his fears, his every fragile piece, trying to judge whether he was strong enough to anchor a sovereign rebirth. Images slammed into him, flashes of Lysera's childhood, her loneliness behind palace walls, her forced smiles in front of advisors, her sleepless nights trembling under the weight of a crown she never wanted. Visions she never showed anyone, visions only the core could access. And Ethan felt tears burn his eyes as he whispered into the swirling maelstrom. You deserved better than this world gave you. The core surged, fire spiraling around him, but he did not let go. You're more than their expectations. Another pulse slammed through him, stealing his breath. You're more than your fear. His voice cracked with emotion. And you're not alone. The light exploded outward. And for a moment, Ethan feared it had consumed him whole. But then the glow bent inward, drawn not by force, but by his voice, his will, his stubborn refusal to let her fade into ancient destiny. And deep within the radiance, a hand formed. Trembling, small, reaching, Ethan gasped, his heart seizing as Lysera's fingers brushed his through the light. Weak, but real, Ethan. Her voice whispered inside his mind. Fragile as breath, I'm lost. He closed his hand around hers with every ounce of strength he had left. Then hold on to me, he whispered. I'll bring you home. The core flared, light twisting in violent spirals before collapsing inward like a star folding into itself, pulling Lysera's form back into the world with a cry that echoed through the vault as she fell forward into Ethan's arms, her body burning with ancient energy yet unmistakably alive. She trembled against him, tears streaking her cheeks as she whispered, You came for me? I always will. Ethan murmured into her hair, his own tears falling as the core dimmed behind them. The ancient glow fading as the merge completed at last. But the moment of peace shattered as the vault ceiling cracked open and the invading warships. Soldiers descended in burning lines, their armor dark as obsidian, their weapons glowing with parasitic greed. Their leader pointing at Lysera with a voice dripping hunger. "The sovereign returns," he hissed. "And she belongs to us." Lysera stepped forward before Ethan could shield her, the last remnants of sovereign energy flickering across her skin like lightning trapped in crystal. And her voice rose with a strength she had never spoken with before. "I belong to no one." The air trembled as her awakening power unfurled. Not violent, but resolute. A pulse of ancient authority that swept through the chamber like a tidal wave, knocking the invaders backward as if the universe itself had drawn a line through fate. Ethan watched, breathless, as she lifted her hand. Steady now, confident now, sovereign now. "This world," she whispered, "and this human who saved me stand under my protection." Light erupted from her palm, not destructive, but binding. A shield of shimmering energy forming around them with the force of a star reborn, sending shockwaves through the palace, through the sky, through orbit where fleets reeled beneath the power they had come to steal. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy felt the presence of a true sovereign. Not ruled by destiny, not shaped by ancient command, but awakened by choice. Anchored by a human who saw her soul beneath the crown. Ethan looked at her with awe and fierce love as the invaders scattered and the planet steadied beneath her rising power. And Lysera turned to him with a trembling smile. "I came back because you called me, and I'll stay," she whispered softly, touching his cheek with glowing fingers. "Because you saw me, the star systems would shake alliances, would rewrite wars, would hush in fear, but in that quiet, glowing vault, a princess reborn and a human who refused to let go stood together. Their fates intertwined like constellations forming a new sky, and the universe, for once, bowed.